Okay, this video is talking about CP and CF releases. A lot of people are asking the question or wondering about what CP is and what CF is. And basically, CP is referring to centripetal acceleration. And centripetal acceleration, both of those, CP and CF, they're both talking about an object moving around a center or traveling around a center. But CP is actually the force that's pulling on the object. So when I'm talking about CP, I'm talking about centripetal acceleration in my hands or my body pulling on the handle, and me pulling on the handle is what's making that club head travel around. So it's the force of me pulling on the handle that's making the club head move. CF is centrifugal force, and that's actually the force that the club head has as it's traveling around, and that's actually the force of the club head trying to pull away or pulling away from the center or pulling away from the middle. So centripetal, usually when we see a CP release or a centripetal release, we see someone who's kind of pulling on the handle and holding off that finish. It'll look more this way. And centrifugal will be one where the handle is kind of being overtaken by the weight of the club head or the pull of the club head, and the finish will look more like that. So if we're looking at like Rory, McIlroy, Phil Mickelson, a lot of guys, Vijay Singh has a pretty pronounced CF release, so much so that his right hand seems to come completely off the club. So that's all just due to centrifugal force. The weight of that club head as it pulls around, taking over and flying by. And the way we can counteract that, if we wanted to have a CP release or a centripetal release, we would actually have to exert a little bit more force on the handle or pull harder on the handle as we're coming through to keep that club head from overtaking. So the other thing that I wanted to show in this video was, if we look at a lot of the older style players like Ken Venturi, Ben Hogan, Sam Snead, we see a lot different release pattern than we see, or we have been seeing among modern swings. We see much more of the handle kind of entering low and then exiting left and kind of out the side a little bit more, rather than where we see a lot of this CF today, where the centrifugal force is taking over and that's throwing the club head this way, and we're seeing the handle kind of point back out in front of the foot line, and the club head will actually pass to the left before the handle does. So again, in a CP release, the handle will actually kind of lead the club head through, and in a CF release, the club head will kind of lead the handle. So for a long time I struggled on how to get this CP release. I really wanted this CP release, but I didn't really get that there was nothing I could do to stop the centrifugal force other than apply more force to the centripetal acceleration. So what that basically means is I've got to apply a lot of force to the handle to keep the club head from overtaking the handle. And what I found recently, I've been just doing a ton of research on these old swings, and you see, and a lot of this old instruction talks about the left forearm and the left wrist rolling. You see in Ben Hogan's book, you see him doing this, and really talking about that left wrist rolling over and going this way. And I felt like that would be such an inaccurate way to swing the golf club. But if you want to create a CP release, that's a really good way to do it, because when you do that move, when you roll that left wrist over, even though it looks like you might be creating a CF, or centrifugal force release, you're actually pulling on the handle with that roll, and even though it looks like the club head is passing, it's not really passing the center. So as your body turns and you roll that left wrist over, you're pulling that handle hard through, and the club head's not passing. So the way you can kind of see this is if you look on the down the line view, if I'm coming through and I don't do that pulling, if I just kind of drag the club through this way, then the club will fold over that way and the handle will point back this way. If I do the CP release, or if I really take that roll and fold that over, you'll see that the club actually is going to exit, or is going to pull back inside and then across to the left, and the club head, so the handle is going to come in. As I roll this over, or make this fold over move with my left wrist, the handle comes in, and the club head actually stays on the target line longer, and the handle disappears. So that's the difference between the CF and the CP. Both are effective. What wouldn't be effective is if the club head started passing the handle before we got to impact. So if everything stopped before impact, if our body rotation and our arms and everything stopped before impact, the club would take over, hit the ball. We can get high shots, left shots, right shots, face pulls, slices, bat pin, and basically every miss that you don't want could happen if we stopped there early and the centrifugal force took over and threw the club forward from there. So in a CF, we really have to be conscious of leading all the way through and pulling everything way ahead to allow for that club head to not pass the hands until after impact. In a CP, we have to be conscious of actually feeling this left wrist kind of roll over and down, and that action is pulling on the handle, and that's what's keeping the club head from passing the hands. So hopefully that makes sense. CF, CP, and how they look, what happens when you do a CF, and what happens when you do a CP.